Welcome, everyone. Thanks for tuning in. I have another great discussion coming up here. And for those of you who don't know, this is kind of like my, I think, 10th or 11th discussion slash interview that I have done with my friends, mentors, and colleagues, and just learning a lot from my friends. And I hope that this is also helpful for all of you. Again, if you guys don't know, it's there on the thumbnail. My YouTube channel is youtube.com/PJS Center. And that's where you could catch a lot of my other creative videos, but also a whole series that I've been doing for these past couple of weeks where I've been just chatting again with my friends and mentors about COVID-19, current events, and just hopefully together we are sharing a lot of good wisdom and insight for all of you. Well, I am super excited today because we have just an awesome opportunity to meet not just with someone wise, but someone that is very close and near and dear to my heart. Let me bring him in here. You guys, this is Pastor Ben Shin. And the reason why I say someone so close and near and dear to my heart is because Pastor Ben has known me since I was in college. And Pastor Ben, don't mention any of those years. Those are dark years for mine. But Pastor Ben also married my wife and I know his wife, I know his kids. I've babysitted his kids one time before. And Pastor Ben has also been a mentor in my life. Gosh, I think for like almost like 20 years, 18 or 20 years now. He has been my life coach. He has walked with me and walked me through all of my seminary at Talbot School of Theology since my MDiv days and even during my THM. And again, just someone that I have known for so long, someone that I have asked so many questions to about life, pastoral ministry, and someone that I just not only respect and trust, but someone that I love and I'm so thankful for. So thank you so much, Pastor Ben, for being here. And Pastor Ben, just for the people who are watching, they might not know who you are, which is kind of crazy because you are kind of one of the most well-networked Asian pastors, I think, on this planet. But Pastor Ben, why don't you just give a kind of a brief introduction of yourself, your ministry background, your family, just to get the audience to know you a little bit better.
All right. Well, thank you, John, and thank you for the kind introduction. It's my honor and pleasure to be with you today. So I am a pastor at a Korean church. I lead the English ministry called the Bridge for New Life Vision Church. I am also a professor of Christian ministry and leadership at Talbot School of Theology. I'm a husband married to my wonderful wife, Jen. I have two boys, Adam, who is 14, and Zachary, who is 11. I live in Arcadia, California, and just glad to be with you today, John. Thanks for having me.
You know, Pastor Ben, we kind of always go back and forth. You guys, for those who don't know, I'm a proud Trojan, and Pastor Ben is a proud Bruin. And we always like to do a lot of jokes back and forth to each other. And even in our Talbot days, I remember there's a couple of professors that were on the Trojan side and a couple who were on the Bruin side. And it's always fun to talk about those things. But it's also always a joy for me to talk to you about church and pastoral ministry. But before we get into that, you know, this whole COVID-19 crisis and pandemic, I just want to know, how are you doing? How is your family doing? How has Jen, your wife, and Adam and Zach, your kids, been adjusting to the stay-at-home thing, doing the whole homeschool thing? Why don't you kind of let us all know how you guys are going through that?
Well, I think you mentioned the key word, John. It's adjusting. Of course, this is not what any of us wanted, and my boys had to forego their last semester of school with missing their friends, myself as well with my schooling at Talbot. And just, me, John, I like to go out and be with people and meet with people. So it's been quite a different experience for us. But I have cherished the time, too, for me to have extended time with my family. That's been a real benefit. Extended time with God. And I had a stack of books that I've been meaning to get to that I finally got to, and I've actually completed most of them. So I consider it an unexpected gift and blessing from the Lord. And my wife has been diligent in just taking care of us and cooking wonderful meals every day for us. And so it's actually been pretty good. I have no complaints. I do miss our previous life, but again, at this time, I see this as a gift from God for us.
Yeah, how is your students from Talbot? How did they adjust going from going to a real classroom setting, which is always the most ideal, and going everything to like an online setting?
Well, I think fortunately Talbot had already made the adjustment a couple of years ago where we had gone with a couple of our degrees fully online. So the students were familiar with the online format. And what we did was my pastoral classes and field ed classes, we did it through Zoom. So it was still live, even though we weren't physically together. But a number of our students, for example, flew home because they didn't feel the necessity to be out in La Mirada. So I had one student who was in Hawaii, and he would be on the beach, and we would see the background. It wasn't a virtual background, it was the real background. We're like, wow.
Oh,
So we were
poor
kind of,
him.
poor him, right? We were kind of envious of that. But at the same time, it's different because we couldn't physically be there, but we did have a good space to have connection. And I think, praise God, I thank God for Zoom. I think Zoom has been a blessing for all of us. And I've become, in the meantime, an expert on Zoom.
That's wonderful. I love hearing that, and I'm glad the students kind of kept up with all their work. I know that just seminary was such a fun time for me, and I know it's just not a good feeling to all of a sudden get forced into this online situation. But I'm really happy that everything kind of worked out, and you guys got to finish your classes. Pastor Ben, we're going to get kind of right into this. As you know, we are going through a very volatile time in our country right now. It's really sad, just the tragic death of George Floyd. And, the common reaction for Asians is for us to kind of stay quiet, especially during times of conflict. We like to play it safe, and we don't want to get involved. But for second and third gen Asians and Asian Americans, however, they're much more Americanized. And I even see Asians protesting, which when I was growing up, I didn't really see too much of that. You were around during the LA riots. I was a child. I think you were already past college during those times.
Mhm.
So how can we respond as Asians and Asian Americans to what's going on right now with the riots, the protests, especially as it revolves around the death of George Floyd?
Oh, well, it's been a very heavy time for me personally. I'm grieving the death of George Floyd, the injustice that was done to him, and the system that is very corrupt. As a follower of Christ, beyond just the color issue, we see a person who, in the image of God, his life has been snuffed out unnecessarily. And that's just wrong. It's murder. And so I think what I am doing, and again, as an Asian American, I'm slow to this. And part of the reason, John, is I'm trying to be very thoughtful in that I want to contain my anger because I don't want to say something that's going to add more fuel to the fire. I do want to be redemptive and try to provide some solutions to it. As a pastor of a congregation, my church is looking to me as well for leadership. And in my Sunday message, I did an extension of my Sunday message, which I had previously recorded, and I made a statement about this tragedy. And I was asking for civility, and if people are believers, followers of Christ, for them to pray. I think on some action points, I think protest is good. I think we need to do that. That is our civil right. And I think what I'm seeing today, I just got a text right before I came on with you, John. Some of our church people are going, some of our church members' businesses were affected. And so they're gathering people to go and clean things up. So that's kind of a redemptive measure. I'm going to have a prayer meeting tonight with our church. I invited my entire congregation to join us. We need to pray. We need to pray for things to change. We need to pray for those who are grieving. We need to pray for protection for policemen. We have a couple of policemen in our congregation. We have to pray for government that they would make better choices. I think we need to speak up, but I think there are proper ways to speak up, and also there are improper ways. As a pastor, I see the pain and I empathize with that. And I'm praying as I watch the TV and as I see all the things that are going on. I'm not surprised that in light of everything that's been happening, John, the injustices, the murders, the COVID-19, the pent-up anxiety, I'm not surprised that this didn't happen earlier, actually. This just explosion of everything that's been building up. And again, for people who may not have the hope of Christ, this should be expected. So again, I'm just trying to pray that I would do my part as a leader, to lead the church, to speak up because it's necessary, and to also ask God for help and for mercy and for wisdom. So that's my simple response to this very complex situation.
I kind of alluded to it a little before, but I think, again, for me, I'm a really good example of this. Growing up, no one ever really taught me how to properly respond or even process things like this. It was just, stay away from it and be safe. That's not really bad, but I think now in my older years, I'm having a hard time process this, and I think, tell me if I'm on the right path with this. I think that's the reason why a lot of younger people are just blasting social media with their anger. They're just saying their thoughts. A lot of it's not really helpful, cussing president out, whatever it is. Do you think that's kind of an accurate explanation of why this might be happening?
Well, yes and no. So one of the pastors that I highly respect is Brian Laritz. And yesterday he put out a very thoughtful and meaningful Instagram story that I watched again this morning. And he talked about the solutions of where this can get better. He mentioned God ordaining of the family, of government, and the church. And he gave a meaningful discussion. And going back to some of the things that we're seeing, the family, we haven't talked about these issues. And Brian Laritz shared some painful stories about how he has 3 boys and how he had to teach them as he was training them to drive. He didn't just talk about here's drive this way or this speed. He said, if you get pulled over by a white policeman, here are some tips. Put your hands on the steering wheel, no sudden moves, and always be respectful. And I thought, wow, that was hard to hear, that he would have to go through that and share that with his boys. And so I realized for myself, I have not done a good job in teaching my family about racial issues. And so I just picked up a book that's been on Kindle. It's called Woke Church, and it's by a guy named Eric Mason. And I started reading that this morning because I need to have a conversation with my boys about race and about these tensions and why this is happening, so that they would see this and understand it better. So that's my part as a family. Hopefully government will send out some helpful issues as well, and then also the church. So that's going to be my role tonight as I gather our folks, and I'm going to share some thoughts and some prayer requests, and then we need to just come before God and say, Lord, heal our land. This is a situation that affects all of us. And so, again, I think the cue from Brian Laritz is most helpful, that will allow us to speak meaningfully, graciously, truthfully, and redemptively to this very terrible situation.
With, it's just a double whammy that we're in this situation with the riots and protests, but we were already in a crazy situation with the pandemic and COVID-19. And I was listening to a news reporter say that it's like 2 pandemics sandwiched together. So with everything that's going on with the virus and with all this protesting, what do you believe, or what concerns do you have about the church, or maybe what are some key ideas that you believe the church needs to focus on right now in light of this double social pandemic and health pandemic that we're going through?
Well, first of all, the church can't be silent. I think we need to speak with a voice of clarity, with truth and grace. Yes. I think that's going to be necessary. And I think because there's no one central person in the church, other than maybe your pastor, Rick Warren, and some others who are speaking out, I think multiple voices with the same message of the gospel need to be shared in our respective areas and spheres of influence. So for me, it's going to be with probably Asian American pastors and churches. And so I put out some recordings already. I'm speaking to my church, and we'll probably talk to our parachurch students and so forth, because, again, this is a big problem. So we need multiple voices with a similar message of Christ. That's one area I think that's going to be really helpful. I think on the second side, I would say we need to then move ahead. And the Christian church has always been good in responding to disasters. And this is a disaster. And whether it be cleaning up and helping businesses get back on track. Because the irony is, this weekend was supposed to be the scheduling of the reopening of LA and a lot of places where businesses can get back on track. And now they are way pushed back because a lot of their properties and their goods have been destroyed or stolen. So now the church has to figure out, how can we help these people? So it's a redemptive message, John, helping them clean up, helping them reestablish, helping them to pay the bills, helping them to get food on the table for their families. So I think we have to be proactive in that second measure, because if the church doesn't respond, I don't know if anyone else will.
As you were talking, I was reminded of a recent article that came out on Gospel Coalition, and it talked about how you can't let coronavirus divide the church. And it was talking about how, some people are taking it a different way and other people might be taking it a different way. What is some wisdom that you can offer? Because I know people that don't really think it's that big of a deal. It's probably not going to affect them. And then there are people kind of like me. I'm like really worried. I have a baby. And because there's so much unknown about the virus, I have to be as safe as possible. So whether it's your church or any church, I'm sure there's going to be two sides and people are going to be both sides. So what kind of wisdom and counsel can you offer to churches who are experiencing that right now?
Yeah, I mean, that's a worldview question, John, that it's very complex. So let me offer just a few thoughts, okay? I think we need to understand that different people will have different responses. And we can't criticize or condemn either side. And the reason why is because people are different. John, you are in a different life stage with smaller children versus people who are empty nesters. So who is right? Well, you're both right in your own respective sense. So you have to do what you need to do with your setting, and they need to do what they need to do in their setting. And American Western culture is very individualistic. So with that, we have our own sense of our rights and what we think is an infringement on our rights. Maybe as an Asian American, though, John, we think a little bit more collectively, or at least semi-collectively. So we think a little bit broader and maybe wider. So again, those are both strengths, and I think we need to live in the tension of both of those strengths without criticizing it. I tend to be more cautious as well. So while churches, for example, are opening, some of them this weekend and soon thereafter, I've told my congregation at the earliest, it's going to be August. And I'm trying to buy some time because I think the CDC and governmental regulations will be different between now and August, hopefully a little bit more lenient. Secondly, I want to see if there's any spikes anywhere, and if so, I'm going to stay away or I'm going to proceed. And quite honestly, John, here's another thing. I think some people will never come back to church until an actual vaccine happens. And so who knows when that's going to be. I can't force them. I don't want to say, well, come, and then they get sick. I have to honor and respect that difference. And so, whatever I feel, safe and convicted to do, I'm going to do it. But I'm going to factor in what the doctors are saying. I'm going to listen to government. Romans 13 and Titus and 1 Peter talks about, submitting to the government. And I'm going to take my cues from other older, wiser saints, a lot of them churches, and I've talked to a few pastors even before I came on this call. What is your plan for reopening? And some really creative ideas and already some missteps that people are taking. So I'm learning from all that. So I just I have a huge responsibility, John. The last thing I want to do is get anyone sick, and certainly not to the point that they pass. And so I have to factor all these things in before I can take steps that I, in good conscience, can feel would be wise. And so that's kind of where I'm at. But I'm in no rush, to be honest with you. And like many people say, the church has not been closed. We've been more open than ever. And
Right.
I've been more busy. You have as well as a pastor. I'm on almost every night. I'm teaching a class starting this Wednesday on apologetics. We have a prayer meeting on Monday nights. We do our marriage builders. We do our singles group. We have all kinds of things that are going on. And so, I don't know, I feel very connected to the church, to be honest. I do miss being together. But again, in this situation, that's the best we can do.
Yeah, Pastor Ben, all your years of pastoral ministry, have you ever experienced anything like this? Isn't this just nuts? It's crazy. It's
Yeah,
just
it's
crazy.
crazy. It's crazy. In my pastoral ministry class during the semester, I had to readjust a few of my lectures because I do a whole lecture on shepherding and visitation. Well, you can't do that. So how do you do it virtually?
Yeah.
Evangelism. Well, we can't meet together. I can't go door to door, talk to people in an open space. So how do we do evangelism virtually? So I came up with a couple of new lectures that, again, I never in my wildest dreams thought I would have to create.
Well, man, that's a really good segue into our next question. That, and also, I mean, again, you just said you were already talking to pastors before we talked right now. And again, you have such a wealth of experience, but coupled with leadership development. We call you the pastor to pastors because we always go to you for advice and counsel and life coaching, especially as it deals with our families and ministry. And so, in your wealth of counseling, training, developing pastors, young pastors like me when I was growing up. What advice do you have, especially as you just mentioned, you had to think of new things because you can't do some things right now. What advice do you have right now to young pastors in their 20s as they're trying to develop during this crisis, but also advice to more older, experienced pastors, kind of like in their 40s and 50s? So, what advice would you give right now to both of those groups separately?
Yeah, that's a great question. So I'm going to get a little bit nerdy with you for just a minute,
Yes.
okay? So I think people understand these two terms of form and function, okay? So function is something that's timeless, that doesn't change, whereas forms can change. And so what I've been doing in light of this recent time and how I'm advising people is I need to make sure I understand what functions need to happen and how I, as a minister of the gospel, need to stick to the things that the Bible prescribes. So I have just been diving into the Bible just deeply. I've been reading the Proverbs for wisdom, and now I'm in the Psalms. Yesterday, for my morning devotional, I read all of Psalm 119, the longest chapter in the Bible, 176 verses. I was blessed and encouraged, and I needed that in light of all the stuff that's happening with George Floyd and the riots and all the stuff and just the heaviness that I was feeling. I needed the scripture to bless me and to inform me on what functions I need to do. And one of the things that that chapter reminds us about is that God's loving kindness is there and that we need to call out to him, that he's available, if not even waiting for us. So that's something that was reaffirmed for me as a leader. No matter how old or young you are, we must understand the biblical functions that God has called us to according to his word. Now, when it comes to forms, that's going to look differently in different scenarios. We had never imagined the online form of doing church that way. People maybe scoffed at that prior to the pandemic. Now everyone's having to do it. But if we don't do that, then there's no church. So how do we gather functionally and how do we teach functionally? Those are things that don't change in a different form. Well, we do it through Zoom and Google and Skype and all these other different ways. So again, we have to balance both. I think young people are very good with form. They're very creative. They look at all the latest things, and whether it be TikTok or whatever it may be, they're good with that. But they don't have sight of function. So sometimes what they'll post is things that are not helpful, maybe sometimes unwise. Whereas older people, they have the function down, but they don't know how to get it out in terms of form. So it's a mutual learning, John. I think, I learn a lot from my boys. They show me things that I'm like, well, how did that happen? And so they can inform me on form, but I can inform them on function. So my advice to younger and older leaders is learn from each other, learn well, and always have a teachable posture. You said I'm older and pastor pastors. True, I'm older. Yes, I do pastor pastors, but there's so much I learned from other pastors, many of them much younger than myself. And so I don't have all the answers. I don't think any human does, other than the person of Jesus. But that's why I need to continue to learn and read. I need to see how different functions will be communicated in different forms. And if we can be teachable to that, that's going to be helpful. I'll give you a classic example. My dad is really innovative. So the other day we went over to his place and we taught him how to use FaceTime so that he could see us.
Yeah.
You know, and some of you have heard my story. A long time ago, he wanted to learn how to use an iPad. So we got him that. He did that. Then he wanted to do Facebook. Okay, good. Now he does Facebook. Now he's doing FaceTime with us. So I don't know. The next thing he's going to want to do is get a PS4 or something. I don't know. But all that to say, you know, he's going to be 90 years old this June. But
praise the Lord.
But what a great example of someone who's always learning, always growing. And I think if you're going to be an effective leader, that's going to be key. Always learning and thus being causal to always growing. And that's what I'm trying to do myself.
You know, this might be a little bit of a curveball because I know I didn't set you up for this, but as you were speaking, I'm sure you're talking to not just your friends, but like I said, other pastors who are seeking you for counsel. And you and I both know Roy Kim, and I was talking to him about this. And as you are counseling other people right now, and are you seeing or experiencing or hearing the anxiety going up with pastors? And if you are, how are we supposed to minister to them? How are we supposed to help people with all this anxiety and grief going up?
Yeah, well, certainly it's certainly growing up, getting worse, and not just for the average person in the congregation, for pastors as well. And that's why I took it upon myself to do a ministry of just calling pastors on the phone and just trying to encourage them. So, you know, it's safe for me to just let them vent and all their frustration and fatigue that they're facing. And I know, talking to counselor friends, that they are booked to the max. There's no space for them to book anyone else. So now that you mentioned Roy Kim, Roy and I just taped the next episode's two-part episode for his Same Boat podcast on the church and counselors. And I gave a whole list to my class of counselors that I recommend, and I told them, utilize them, spread the word, get the word out there, because it's above my pay grade. I can do minimal counseling, but I can't deal with the depression, anxiety, and the fears that people are facing right now. So we have to partner. And that's why I was saying the church and counselors need to partner together. And if we don't do it, we're going to be digging ourselves in a pretty deep hole.
Yeah, my heart goes out to friends of mine who, and you know them too, who have lost their moms and dads and relatives. Even a really well-known head pastor passed away at Bethel Korean Church, and it's just so sad to see. Like, the funeral can only be with the family members only, and it's just, there's just no closure for a lot of people, and my heart goes out to them. And I really hope that the stuff that you're doing with Roy is really going to help others. I feel like it would be so fitting to do this because, again, we always love just hearing your wise counsel. And so, Pastor Ben, if there was an opportunity somehow, just in a magical place, ABC, CBS, NBC, they all had their cameras on you, and you could share one message or sermon of hope or encouragement, you could just kind of share one thing with millions of people in America. What would be your message right now? What would be your sermon right now?
Well, it would be two words: trust God. And I just recently preached on Proverbs 3, 5, and 6. And in that, the focus is really trusting God with all your heart. In all your ways, acknowledge him. Do not lean on your own understanding, and he will make your path straight. And I think this is one of those things that America has faced, similar to 9/11, when people at that time did turn to God, at least temporarily. this time around, people are not turning to God for some reason. They're turning to other means. And I think this is the message that I would bring to all of us. I think Jesus is our hope. Jesus saves us not only one time for eternal life, but every day as we trust him with our hardship, with our needs, with our pain, with our injustices. And I think as we follow the person of Christ and live like him, we can display to a watching world what it means to have eternal life that is not just long time, but qualitatively abundant. And that's what I would want to pass on to people so that they would understand that there's greater meaning and purpose than what we face. And Jesus is the one who gives us that purpose. So I think, especially as believers, if we can, in a convincing way, lean into God in such a way that people will look at us and say, wow, what's your secret? And then we could all point to Jesus. I think that's very helpful. You know, I'm reading a book right now. It's about a Christian rocker named Larry Norman, who's one of the first Christian rockers. And he actually put together this one thing called One Way. And if you've seen old videos of this, the One Way was every time a Christian would do something and people would applause, he would point this way. He'd say one way, which was always pointing up to God. And then in the 70s, President Jimmy Carter, who was a believer, he did the same thing. He pointed one way. And I think that's hard to say today because people don't like to say there's one exclusive way. But it gives us a direction. And so when I say trust God and I'm pointing to Yahweh God, Jesus Christ, that's the one way that we can get things a lot better on track. And that would be the message I would want to proclaim if given the opportunity.
Oh, man, thank you so much for sharing that, sir. Such a great Christ-centered message right there. Pastor Ben, you are a pastor of the English ministry at New Life Vision Church, and I wanted to give an opportunity here to, again, someone might be watching that's looking for a service, and so where or how could they catch your service online? What time is it at, and where, and what channels or media is it on?
Yes, so we are on Facebook. It's NLVC Bridge. So our ministry is called The Bridge. Our website is nlvcbridge.com. And our Sunday services are Sunday at 11:30. And we are currently going through a series on the Proverbs. And I just did a study this last Sunday on true riches. We're going to be starting a series on 1 John in a couple of weeks. So I'm an expositional teacher, so I teach an Old Testament book and a New Testament book. So we're going to finish up 2020 with True Fellowship is the title of the series in 1 John. So looking forward to teaching that in the near future.
Oh, that's awesome. 1 John is one of my favorite letters. That sounds so exciting. 11:30, so Sundays at 11:30, NLVC Bridge. I'll put the links down below for anyone who's watching in the YouTube description. I'll put both those links to the NLVC Bridge website and Facebook group page. Catch their service there. Pastor Ben, is your service live at 11:30?
It's pre-recorded.
Okay, it's pre-recorded, and so catch that service there. Shout out to my friend Jacob Cho, who's also a pastor with you over there. And of course, there's Andrew, someone I've known since he was a student at Riverside, leading worship there with his awesome voice. And so great stuff over there. And Pastor Ben, you're also a professor at the greatest seminary, right, of all time, Talbot School of Theology. And so, sorry guys, I graduated from there. But as the fall semester or even summer is coming up, what are some classes that you're going to be teaching this fall or the summer?
Okay, so in the summer, I'm doing a hermeneutics class online starting in July. And in the fall, I've been transferred now. I'm overseeing the Christian ministry and leadership, field education, and pastoral ministry classes. So our dear Mick Boersma is actually retired now. He's officially retired.
Legend.
After 32 years. And he was my field ed director and mentor and a dear friend. And I'm so thankful that he, a year and a half ago, started preparing me for this succession. So I'll be teaching pastoral ministry class online and all the field education classes now. I'm doing all the field ed classes, including the senior classes. So that's pretty much what I'll be doing in the fall. And so it helps that I'm also currently a pastor, so that I'm not just teaching this stuff theoretically. Although I do know the theory, I'm actually experiencing it live right now in my own life. So it helps me, I think, as I bring real life situations to people in the classroom.
Well, that sounds awesome. For anyone who's watching, who's thinking about seminary, I highly recommend going to Talbot School of Theology. Check out their website. It's a great school. Again, that's where I went for my MDiv at THM. And Pastor Ben was actually my professor for hermeneutics and for pastoral epistles when I was doing my THM. And so those are great classes to take with him. And I just want to say, Pastor Ben, thank you so much for your time here. I always call you my half uncle because I'm also a Shin, and so I always like to hope that we're related somehow because you're just my
only
life
in
coach.
Christ, John. Only in Christ.
I know. I don't want to taint your image. I know. I don't want to taint your image. But thank you so much, sir. Again, you guys connect with Pastor Ben at his church or Dr. Ben Shin at Talbot School of Theology. And I hope you guys are all safe and healthy. See you guys later.